Well, I'd say it's no surprise that we are encountering difficulties about immigration issues with Spain. We've put all our goodwill into this process of trying to achieve an arrangement which guarantees maximum fluidity. That means a derivation of Schengen, but we're going to keep trying. We're going to try and do it in a neutral way. We're going to try and do it in a way that neither side has to cross their red lines. We will not cross our red lines. In relation to Gibraltar, there are no entities that are clearer on protecting sovereignty, jurisdiction and control than the GSLP and the Liberals, and we're in government today. So we're not going to permit anything that crosses our red lines, but we're going to keep on trying to reach an arrangement, an accommodation which works for both sides and which doesn't require either side to cross red lines.
You've spoken about other solutions, for example, using Frontex or technological solutions, but how much willingness is there on the part of Spain to go down these routes?
Obviously, you wouldn't have been reading a newspaper article saying that we've reached an impasse if there had been a willingness to take those sorts of solutions which we put on the table and which are neutral. And frankly, we are prepared to consider anything else which could be a neutral solution, or indeed to further explore these alternatives.
But Spain?
You have to ask Spain that. I mean, too often people think that the position of the government of Gibraltar in explaining the position of Spain somehow infects that the government of Gibraltar's position is changing. Our position is not going to change, but it is fair that somebody should ask Spain whether or not they're prepared to bring flexibility to this in order to propose or accept a solution that doesn't cross their red lines and doesn't cross our red lines, almost meets in what you might call the neutral ground, in an attempt to ensure that we do achieve that greater prosperity for the whole of the region, and we don't bring this negotiation to an end without having resolved those issues, which can become very difficult after the 31st of December.
Well, what's the timeline for coming to an agreement on this? Because obviously we're all aware that the UK is in the middle of trying to strike a trade deal with the EU. So how would that impact on this arrangement? And what would happen if this arrangement was signed before the UK signs a trade deal with the EU? What would the consequences of that be?
Gibraltar's circumstances are completely different, and the United Kingdom is not looking for any arrangement which deals with immigration. You've got to understand that the United Kingdom settled the issue of free movement for those who had rights under the treaties in the withdrawal agreement. This is one of the things that the leader of the opposition, with respect to him, hasn't understood about the arrangements. He says we should have resolved the free movement of persons issues at the time of the withdrawal agreement and under the MOUs. Well, the withdrawal agreement dealt only with the rights of those who were already exercising EU rights, rights at work, not with issues relating to free movement of those who were not exercising EU rights. Those are the things that we have to resolve now. In the context of what it is that we have in our armoury, in order to be able to do that, people also have to understand, the leader of the opposition in particular, although I'm sure that he does understand it as a lawyer, that everything that's contained in the MOUs falls flat and dead on the 31st of December. So all the things that we agreed in the context of the withdrawal agreement are back in our hands as aces, if Spain considered them to be irritants, as aces in the context of this negotiation. This negotiation runs in parallel with the negotiation in respect of the UK-EU agreement, but it has to touch and concern different things. That's why we still have all our aces available, even potentially the tax treaty, which provides that it can be terminated in the event that the conditions for it to be performed are not provided for, and in that context the removal of Gibraltar from the blacklist is an issue. So all of these things are still live and in the negotiation. We have them available to us to put on the table to deal in the context of the arrangements we're trying to bring about. But the arrangements we're trying to bring about are not just going to be good for us, they're going to be good for everybody who lives and works in this region, and for people who want to cross the frontier, whether or not for work.
Well, given that we're leaving the EU on the 31st of December, what would be the deadline for achieving this deal? Would it go right up to the wire? Would you need to achieve something sooner?
So look, in the context of this negotiation, you want to do things before European Council on the 15th of October, and you will have read that that is the aim of all of the negotiators in the main negotiation. If you don't achieve that, you've got until midnight on the 31st of December. You may then need implementation periods rather than transitional periods, implementation periods for what you've agreed. If you don't achieve an agreement, it doesn't mean that on the 1st of January you just sit back and say, we didn't achieve an agreement in time, let's forget about it and let's condemn everyone to the absence of an agreement. You continue trying, although you may then have a fallow period when people may have inconveniences whilst we achieve an agreement later on. So look, I'm not going to stop trying, because let's be very clear about one thing. I'm going to be extraordinarily tough and immovable when it comes to red lines on sovereignty, jurisdiction and control. But I'm going to put all of my goodwill, all of my energy, all of my enthusiasm, all of my ability and the ability of my team to try and find a neutral solution that doesn't cross our red lines and achieves what we want to achieve and achieves what people around us also need achieving. So, all of that pushes me to continue to be optimistic that we have the ability, the enthusiasm and the energy to do this as long as we have a willing partner on the other side. Never has it been truer that it takes two to tango.
So Schengen is about the free movement of people, but what about goods? You've issued a technical notice today in the event of a no deal. You once mooted joining the customs union. Is there any prospect of that? And could we see a separate border for goods, even if we do join Schengen?
So all of those options are live. If you look at what the options are in respect of goods, you've got joining the customs union, joining a customs union, or doing a free trade agreement on goods with the European Union. Now, look, if you join the customs union, but 95% of it doesn't apply to you, you might say, actually, you're joining a customs union rather than the customs union. And then the question is whether the free trade agreement that you do contains elements which are similar to the common customs union, or whether they are identical, and then you might say that you've done a customs union rather than a free trade agreement. All of those issues are live, but you could find a situation where we agree on one thing. For example, we agree on persons, and so if we're able to skin that very difficult cat, people could walk across the frontier unhindered in immigration terms. But if you carry something with you, or if you're driving in a vehicle that may contain goods, you may still be subject to a control. So it's in our interest to try and do deals in respect of both of those, as long as they don't cross our red lines on sovereignty, jurisdiction or control, to have maximum fluidity guaranteed at the frontier going forward beyond our membership of the European Union. All that is what we are discussing.
Could a differentiated deal infringe on any of the UK's red lines at all? And what's the UK's position on Gibraltar joining Schengen?
So let me be very clear. There are three governments involved in this negotiation. You've asked me questions about the government of Gibraltar's position. I've answered as fully as I am able to. You've asked me questions about Spain, and I've asked you to put those questions to the Spanish government. You're now asking me a question about the United Kingdom government, and it is right that I should refer you to the United Kingdom government in respect of those issues. But let me be very clear. When I spoke to Boris Johnson on Friday, it was one of a number of conversations. We're working hand in glove with the UK negotiating team. If we are working hand in glove with the UK negotiating team, you must be able to assume that the UK and Gibraltar are at idem in respect of these issues. We're of one mind. We're working together to deliver a solution that works for both sides.
How ironclad is this deal going forward? Could it be ripped up by any subsequent Spanish administration, for example?
We're talking about an agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union. We're not talking about agreements with Spain in respect of the issues that we have discussed to now during the course of this interview. That would be a new international treaty. International treaties must be observed. The Latin maxim is pacta sunt servanda. You will have learnt a lot about this in the past weeks because it's been front page news, ironically, in the United Kingdom and in most European capitals. So we'll be dealing with a treaty. Now, of course, a treaty is only as enforceable as the terms of the treaty are clear, precise, and clearly understood by those who would have to enforce the treaty through its mechanisms for enforcement. But I'm confident that if we're able to reach an agreement, it's going to be contained in an enforceable UK European Union treaty and not in a manner that could simply be discarded by a change of government in Spain. But look, there will be many academic writings just in the past 30 days on the observance of international treaties and when they might be or might not be broken in a specified and limited way.
We all know that there's been historically a lack of trust on the rock when it comes to doing deals with Spain. So how will you sell this to Gibraltarians?
I have absolutely no intention of selling anything to anyone. Nobody distrusts the Spanish more than me because I sit around the negotiating table with them. But I also know that we've been able to build up a rapport. And I also can tell you that the Spanish distrust the Gibraltarians as much as the Gibraltarians distrust the Spanish. But we're trying to do an arrangement which works beyond trust and which helps to build trust. But I have absolutely no intention of selling this to anyone. We will come with an arrangement which we think is a good one, and we will put it to the Parliament. It will only be put to the Parliament if it is approved by the Cabinet of Ministers ministers. I'm briefing the leaders of the two parties in opposition. They know what it is that we are discussing. There will be no hard sell. This is not about hard sell. This is about reaching accommodations that have logistical advantages for Gibraltar which do not cross our red lines. I'm not going to try and sell to anyone that we should accept a crossing of our red lines. If anybody wants to do that, they can find another chief minister to do that. This one is never going to sell crossing our red lines.
But would you put it to a referendum?
There's absolutely no need to put to a referendum that which we have a mandate for in the context of a general election. It makes no sense, in my view, to suggest that a deal which is an economic deal with the European Union should be put to a referendum in the way that we would have to put a change of status. Look, I've been very clear. If there is a change of status, the change in the constitutional status in Gibraltar, which cannot be affected by this sort of deal, then that would have to go to a referendum. I wouldn't for one moment pretend to change the status of Gibraltar, or indeed the constitutional status of Gibraltar, without the people of Gibraltar choosing that. That is what self-determination is about, because status and constitutional status are the political future, and the people of Gibraltar must choose that. But if it comes to something which simply guarantees fluidity at the frontier, something which Gibraltarians have been arguing we should have had for many years and complaining that the Spanish haven't given us, and if we're able to do arrangements that do that, that don't touch status and don't cross red lines on sovereignty, jurisdiction or control, then there's absolutely nothing to put to a referendum. We may as well put to a referendum the timings of the opening of the Gaza pool.